Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another session of Finboot interviews. This is our series of online interviews where we bring on thought leaders in green supply chain, sustainability, and industrial decarbonization to share their views and tell us a little bit more about their initiatives that are helping to power and accelerate the energy transition. I will be your host for today. Some of you may know me from previous videos. I am the CEO and co-founder of Finboot, which is a technology company helping capital-intensive organizations accelerate industrial decarbonization, comply with climate regulation, and monetize their sustainability investments. I'm also the host of Green Supply Chain Insights, a series where I bring in my own perspective on green supply chain management, industrial decarbonization, and some exciting innovations in that landscape. Today, I have the pleasure to be joined by José Manuel Estrada. José is a chemical engineer with a PhD in process and systems engineering. He is also the CEO and co-founder of Trovant. As a researcher in environmental biotechnology, also specialized in air pollution. He later moved on into the private sector where he worked as a consultant with a more customer care and project management focus. He's now leading his own startup, Trovant, a business focused on biogas and biomethane, and working very closely with corporates in the energy and environmental sector. Jose, thank you very much for joining us. And once more, it is a pleasure to have you on this interview.
Thank you very much, Juan. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. No, I gave a very brief and kind of a very high-level view of your background and your role, but please could we start maybe by you kind of expanding a little bit on your journey. How did you end up focusing on the energy sector? What led you to launch Trovant, and what is kind of that driving vision behind your business?
Yeah, okay, great. I'll try to summarize all that journey. Basically, as you said, at the beginning of my career, I was more on the academic side of things. So I specialized in air pollution control, biofiltration, and essentially controlling atmospheric pollution. Then I moved to the private sector, and I worked in London for 3 years, and then I came back to Spain. And at that point, I met my co-founder, Alex Colsi, which is also a PhD, which I had met during our PhD at university. And then we started sharing some experiences. We both had made that transition from academia to the private sector, and we were working very closely to the waste treatment sector and energy production from waste. So essentially, he had the idea of, taking it a step further. We had some ideas in our minds where we could bring together our experience and some innovations that we had in mind, and we just decided to launch Trovant in 2018. So it's almost 7 years ago.
Yeah, no, excellent, and yeah, quite a journey already, right? So I always like to hear about kind of academia backgrounds that move on to the startup ecosystem. I myself started my career in academia as well, and I have the certainly biased opinion that PhDs make for very good tech CEOs, right? But again, certainly that's a bit of a biased opinion, right? Now, you mentioned in your remarks, you talked a little bit about kind of that concept of waste to energy, and I think we're going to be expanding on that quite a bit through today's conversation. Let's look a little bit at beyond Trovant as a business, kind of what the industry landscape, that waste to energy concept, what that's looking like, what are the market dynamics, and particularly, again, in that biogas, biomethane segment that is rapidly growing. These days, it feels like every conversation that I have is kind of hitting some part of that value chain. So again, Jose, you as a leader in the sector, what do you think are the most significant market trends and challenges shaping the industry today? And how are these influencing the strategic decisions of companies like Trovant but also the corporate energy players that you collaborate with.
Okay, yeah. So to start with, the production of biogas from any organic waste has been there for a very long time. I would say decades. So essentially, when you treat an organic waste, that's municipal solid waste, can be sludge coming from wastewater treatment, it can be a waste from a food industry. When you treat that waste, you can generate biogas, and that biogas is already valuable because it's got energy in it. So traditionally, people were burning that biogas to generate heat and to generate electricity, and that's been done forever. What's happening nowadays is that there is an interest in purifying that biogas, that is removing CO2, removing other undesired pollutants in it, and essentially having just the methane, which is chemically identical to natural gas. And that way you can export that bioenergy in the form of biomethane, making use of the existing natural gas infrastructure. And that is very, very interesting because it can help decarbonize any application of traditional fossil fuel natural gas can be readily substituted by biomethane. And that's why it is so important, and that's why all eyes are focused on biomethane nowadays. Well, Europe is leading this market. We've got around 1,500 biomethane production plants in Europe at the moment, and there is room for many more. So essentially the big change that we saw and where this kind of exploded was in 2022 with the European Union launching the Repower EU strategy. So basically, what they decided is that biomethane needed to play a key role in helping the European Union on its journey to energy independence. So it is not only a matter of sustainability and reduction of emissions and substituting fossil fuels, it's also about energy independence and energy security, because with biomethane you can generate an alternative to natural gas in countries and territories where you had to import your energy sources. And that's very interesting, and it is playing a key role into the development and the growing interest in this type of bioenergy.
Yeah, no, that's certainly interesting, and I've seen it, right? And I keep witnessing kind of that growth of the European kind of biogas, biomethane space. I think it's also very relevant of how we're using this trend to say, hey, we can continue to use our existing infrastructure, which again has an economic impact, but also has an environmental impact, right? In a positive way, and we don't need to recreate all of this, and at the same time decarbonizing that energy source, right? So turning essentially our compostable waste, our organic bin into energy, of course, at much larger scales, right? But it is also true that that's kind of the reality or the market dynamic at the European level, right? So that's of course super relevant to us, right? As we're acting players in this ecosystem. But with climate action and the energy transition as a whole being of a global nature, I kind of want to broaden our scope a little bit more, right? So I want to take us into another part of the conversation, which is essentially looking at the global energy landscape and specifically focusing for a minute on the energy access and service quality across the world, right? So how are these disparities impacting the energy transition between different regions in the world? And what potential solutions can we bring, potentially also through the biogas biomethane ecosystem, to bridge that energy access gap?
Okay, that's a very interesting point, and I think it links to the core of what we do at Trovant. So at Trovant, we are basically specialized in that cleaning and upgrading process, that is taking the raw biogas that is produced from waste and purifying it so it is an equivalent to natural gas, so it can be used then in any application. And we are focusing on small scale facilities because we see a future where biogas is a decentralized source of energy. So we believe that it can be produced in small facilities which are located very close to where the waste is produced, and they need to generate a positive impact beyond the environmental impact in the local community. So we see a future where any small farm or any small food industry can generate its own energy for themselves and their community. So we believe biogas has the potential to democratize the access to a clean source of energy, which is simple to use and also bridges that gap between waste treatment and energy. So we are right at that very interesting, I would say gray area, but it's not a gray area, it's a boundary where those two different worlds need to start talking to each other. And that can be applied globally, because everywhere in the world we've got sources for biogas. We've got organic waste, we've got wastewater, we've got that raw material that is needed. And the good thing about biogas is that it's not that complicated. The technology behind it has been known for a long time, and it can be very easy to apply, and it's very cost efficient compared to, let's say, oil exploration or hydrogen or other sources of energy. So it's relatively cheap if we compare it to other sources of energy.
Definitely. Definitely a lot easier to find organic waste than it is to drill for oil, right? And
Definitely.
And I think a concept there that you mentioned that I think is fantastic is precisely that, right? So everyone has waste. They start kind of bringing value out of that waste, turning that into energy, and perhaps that moving away from natural resources like oil or natural gas, it also brings a lot of freedom to some of these. Again, this will be countries, this will be organizations, but it gives you an opportunity to kind of break away from a natural resource that not only had a negative environmental impact, but that it was also causing some economic and political dynamics that are not necessarily the most favorable to emerging economies, right?
Yeah,
so
totally agree.
Thank you for that, and I'll now zoom back in, right? So let's not derail and go into the macroeconomics, which is always a nice concept. But going back to kind of that biogas biomethane supply chain, I would like to hear your thoughts specifically on sustainability and compliance, right? Because again, that's one element of we're producing energy from waste. We want to make sure that is actually the case, right? So biogas is a key player in the energy transition and a key player to create sustainable energy sources. But how do you see that regulatory landscape evolving? And what are some of the implications that this will have in producers, in off-takers, in distributors, even in terms of compliance and sustainability reporting, right? So specifically, look, how do we secure the chain of custody from waste to energy? And how do we demonstrate a reliable and honest, if you will, decarbonization of that sector?
Yes, that is linked. That is completely linked to the way the market is evolving. So basically, for that biogas or biomethane to be valuable in the market, there is already a market existing in place in Europe, at least, where that biogas and biomethane has a value, but that value is linked to the carbon footprint of that source of energy. And in order to calculate those CO2 emissions that biogas or biomethane will have, you need to take into account where was the waste sourced, what kind of processing was applied to that waste, how did you transport that waste to your waste treatment facility, and all those steps will generate an impact into the footprint of that biogas. And that will be necessary in order for the end user to be able to justify that he's using a green gas or a greener gas than the one he was using before. So there is a need to have a reliable and transparent way of reporting and making available to your customers and your suppliers all the steps that were taken during that value chain. And that will end up impacting your business in general. So, of course, that way we will be able to make sure that all that new gas is generating a positive impact, and it comes back to the whole supply chain in the form of benefits, because it ends up marking the price of that energy in the market.
Yeah. No, and I think it's a super interesting play here, because it's about, okay, you want to guarantee that chain of custody, you want to make sure you have that traceability. The reasons for it are, yes, they are to prove the environmental impact or the carbon footprint of the gas you are injecting in the network or selling otherwise, but it is also linked very much to those product premiums, right? So you mentioned again the value of your renewable biomethane is going to be very much linked to its carbon footprint, and in order for an off-taker to pay that premium, again, you gotta show the evidence, right? Which absolutely makes sense. And I think it brings those two worlds that we often talk about, which is, again, industrial decarbonization from a regulatory and compliance standpoint, but also from a monetization standpoint, right?
Yeah,
so how do we make money? Yeah, go ahead.
And
sorry.
there will be challenges, of course, because so far the waste treatment sector has been perceived as a sink for investment and money. I mean, it's something you have to do for the environmental benefits, and of course, because we need to do it right. But at this point, there will need to be an investment into knowing exactly where your waste comes from, how do you treat that waste, how much energy do you put into the treatment process. So all those things will have to start playing a bigger and bigger role in order to make those two worlds start speaking the same language.
No, that's great. And that takes me kind of into that last question we talked about, the future, right? So looking ahead, what do you think are the kind of key areas of opportunity for the biogas industry? And I'm sorry, but can't help myself and add a slightly selfish question, but how do you think, again, digital traceability and enhanced supply chain visibility, and I think you touched on this a bit already, but how can these things contribute to unlock this new market potential?
Yeah, that's very relevant at the moment that we are speaking. So basically, for any new biogas or biomethane plants, all those things need to be thought from the very beginning, from the inception of the project. Everybody will have to take into account that there will be measures in place to trace the waste, the process, and how the energy is then sold and generated throughout the value chain. But I think there is a big opportunity for existing waste treatment facilities, which so far they didn't pay much attention to what was happening in their process or upstream, where those waste were collected, how they were transported. Sometimes there's a big challenge where you have different wastes from different sources being mixed and treated together. So there will be a lot of opportunity to implement systems that allow to know how much waste from where was treated at what time. So there is a big or a massive opportunity for digital solutions where you have a low investment cost, but can generate a lot of benefit if you start implementing them at any point of the process. So I think it's a big opportunity, and maybe at some point we can dream of a future where you put your brown bag on the bin, and that bin knows how much waste you put in, and then at the end of the month you get a credit for the energy that was generated with your food scraps, for instance. That would be amazing. We can dream of that, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of what we need to be working towards, right? So to rethink the models of how this could play out in the future. We're building, again, the stepping stone approach of, okay, what's feasible today, right? But always having that big picture of of what could be and imagining what could be, and initiatives like this could be really, really interesting, right? So Jose, getting towards the end of our conversation today, any final thoughts, anything you might have been thinking and we skipped over? And also, of course, if anyone wants to reach out to you, what would be the best way to do so?
Okay, now just thank you for having me. I think we went through all the main points that we had to discuss. And yeah, I would like to invite all your listeners or viewers to visit our website, which is trovant.es for Spain, and well, from anywhere in the world, but that's our website. And please feel free to contact us, send us an email, or contact me on LinkedIn. I'm José Estrada. I'm very easy to be found. And yeah, just thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today, Juan. It's my pleasure. And I guess you've got a massive opportunity in the biogas and in the biomethane sector, and we will definitely work together to push it forward.
I'm confident for that, and absolutely, it's a huge space and a huge opportunity for us. Also, thank you first and foremost for this opportunity, for sharing your expertise, and for everyone that tunes in. If you enjoyed this, make sure you check out our YouTube channel, where we have plenty of interviews and some other interesting video content on green supply chain and industrial decarbonization. Also, make sure to follow Finboot on LinkedIn to stay tuned to new videos and new content every month. Thank you all, and see you next time.